Captain Alex Rodriguez rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the monitor screen again. The numbers were still there, glowing softly in the dim light of the observation deck. 3 months he had been stationed at Omega-7, a deep space monitoring outpost floating in the emptiness between star systems. 3 months of watching empty space and listening to cosmic background radiation. Until today, the signal had appeared at 0347 hours during his routine sweep of the outer rim sectors. At first, he thought it was equipment failure. The transmission was impossibly faint, coming from coordinates that placed it far beyond any known human colony. But the pattern was too regular, too structured to be natural interference. Rodriguez leaned forward and adjusted the frequency filters. The signal strengthened slightly, revealing mathematical sequences that made his heart race. This was not random cosmic noise. Someone was sending this message? Someone intelligent? Martinez, get over here. He called to the communications specialist working at the far end of the station. Lisa Martinez floated over in the low-gravity environment, her boots clicking against the metal deck plates. She was young, maybe 25. With sharp eyes that missed nothing. What do you have, Captain? Take a look at this, Rodriguez pointed to the screen. I picked this up about 20 minutes ago. The source coordinates put it way out past the frontier zone. Martinez studied the display, her fingers dancing over the control panel as she isolated different frequency bands. This is definitely artificial, she said after a few minutes. The mathematical progression here, it's based on prime numbers. Classic first contact protocol stuff. Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. First contact. The phrase that every deep space monitor both hoped for and dreaded? Humanity had been searching for signs of alien intelligence for over 2 centuries. They had found dead worlds, ancient ruins, and lots of empty space, but never a living signal. Can you decode it? He asked. I can try, Martinez said, already pulling up translation software on her workstation. Give me a few hours. Rodriguez watched her work, feeling the weight of the moment. If this was real, if this was actually first contact with an alien species, then everything was about to change. The message could be a greeting, a warning, or something else entirely. Hours passed slowly on the monitoring station, Dr. Kevin Thompson. The station's xenobiologist joined them when Martinez called him over the intercom. Thompson was a thin man in his 40s who had spent most of his career studying theoretical alien life forms. Now he might be looking at proof that such life actually existed. The signal is definitely complex, Martinez reported as the 3 of them gathered around her workstation. I'm seeing star charts, biological data, and what looks like text files. The mathematics are sophisticated, but not beyond our understanding. Thompson leaned over her shoulder to study the biological data streaming across the screen. These genetic sequences are fascinating, he said. If this is real, we're looking at a carbon-based life form not too different from humans. The protein structures are similar, but adapted for a different environment. What kind of environment? Rodriguez asked. Thompson manipulated the data display, highlighting specific sections. Lower gravity, definitely. Probably around half of Earth normal. The atmospheric composition shows higher oxygen content and more stable weather patterns. This species evolved on a much gentler world than ours. Martinez suddenly straightened up, her face pale. Captain, I think I've got the text portion decoded. You need to see this. She transferred the translation to the main display screen. The words appeared in halting, simple English, clearly the result of an automated translation system trying to bridge 2 very different languages. To any who receive this message, we are the Villani of the world you might call Serenity. We send this plea across the vast darkness, hoping that somewhere someone will hear us and understand. Our people have lived in peace for many generations. We know of war only from ancient stories. We have no weapons beyond simple tools for hunting the gentle creatures of our world. Rodriguez read the message with growing concern. This sounded like a distress call. The message continued. A great fleet of warships has come to our system. They call themselves the Hegemony. They have conquered many worlds, they say, and now they come for ours. We have tried to speak with them of peace, but they laugh at our words. They give us 30 of our days to surrender ourselves to their rule, or they will destroy our cities from space." Thompson whistled softly. "They're under attack." "Keep reading," Martinez said quietly. "We know we cannot fight them. We have no soldiers, no warships, no knowledge of battle. But perhaps somewhere in the galaxy there are people who do know these things. People who might help us. We include our star charts and biological information so you will know where to find us and who we are. If anyone receives this message, please know that we are a peaceful people who have never harmed another living being. We do not ask you to die for us, only to help us find a way to survive." The message ended with detailed star charts showing the location of the Villani homeworld and technical specifications that would allow human ships to navigate there. The biological data included environmental requirements and atmospheric composition. Rodriguez stared at the screen for a long moment. Somewhere out there, an entire peaceful civilization was facing extinction. They had reached out across the void, hoping someone would hear their cry for help. And by some miracle that someone was humanity. "How long do we have?" he asked. Martinez checked the timestamp on the message. "This was sent 47 days ago. Earth standard. They said they had 30 days to surrender. So we might already be too late?" "Maybe," Thompson said, "but the transmission is still coming through. If their planet had been destroyed, the signal would have stopped." Rodriguez made his decision. "Martinez, prepare a priority message to Earth Command. Include everything we've decoded. Thompson, I want a full analysis of their biological data and environmental requirements." "What are you thinking, Captain?" Martinez asked. Rodriguez looked at the star charts still glowing on the screen. The Villani homeworld was 3 months away at maximum hyperspace speed. If Earth Command acted quickly, they might be able to mount a rescue mission. But that would mean humanity revealing itself to the galaxy for the first time. I'm thinking that 40 years ago, when I joined the Space Service, they taught us that our mission was to explore, to learn, and to help where we could. Well, here's our chance to do all three. He turned to Martinez. In your message to Earth Command, make sure you emphasize one thing. The Villani described their world as peaceful and gentle. They talked about stable weather and low gravity. They called our kind of environment impossible to survive in. "So?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. "So they have no idea what they just did." They sent a distress call to Earth. They're about to find out what happens when you ask a planet full of hellworlders for help. Within hours, the message was racing toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds. Soon, Admiral Patricia Wells at Earth Command would be reading about humanity's first contact with alien life. She would learn about the peaceful Villani facing destruction at the hands of an aggressive empire. And she would have to decide whether humanity was ready to step onto the galactic stage as protectors of those who could not protect themselves. The Villani had asked for help from anyone who might be listening. They were about to discover that the someone who heard them had evolved on a world so dangerous that every other species in the galaxy would soon learn to call humans by a new name: hellworlders. Admiral Patricia Wells stood in the command center at Earth headquarters, reading the decoded message for the 3rd time. The room buzzed with quiet activity as her staff prepared for what might be humanity's first interstellar military operation. 3 days had passed since Captain Rodriguez's report arrived, and Wells had spent every waking hour planning their response. The decision had been easier than she expected. When faced with a peaceful species asking for help against aggressors, there was really only one choice humanity could make. The Earth Council had voted unanimously to send aid to the Villani, despite the risks of revealing human capabilities to a hostile galaxy. "Status report," Wells called to her aide, Commander Jake Sullivan. Sullivan approached with a datapad in his hand. He was 32 years old, a career military officer who had earned his rank through skill and dedication, rather than politics. The Endeavour launched 6 hours ago with a full diplomatic team. Dr. Sarah Kim is aboard as chief linguist, along with cultural specialists and a small Marine detachment for security. Wells nodded. The Endeavour was humanity's newest exploration. Vessel, equipped with advanced hyperspace drives and sophisticated communication equipment. If anyone could establish proper contact with the Villani, it would be Sullivan's team. Travel time to their system? Wells asked. 3 months at maximum hyperspace speed, Sullivan replied. We're also preparing a larger task force in case the diplomatic mission requires military support. Wells walked to the large display screen showing star charts of the galaxy. The Villani system was marked with a pulsing blue dot, impossibly far from Earth but now connected by the thin thread of their distress signal. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization waited for help that might never come. Meanwhile, aboard the Endeavour, Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan was discovering just how different the Villani were from humans. Dr. Sarah Kim had been working around the clock during their hyperspace journey, using the biological and cultural data from the original message to build a comprehensive translation system. Their language is fascinating, Dr. Kim explained during a briefing in the ship's conference room. She was a small woman with intense dark eyes who spoke 6 human languages fluently. They have over 30 different words for peace, but I can't find a single term that translates directly to war or violence. Sullivan studied the cultural notes displayed on the screen before them. What about their society? How are they organized? That's where it gets interesting, Dr. Kim said, pulling up sociological data. They appear to live in what they call harmony groups. There's no central government as we understand it, no military, no police force. Decisions are made through consensus, and conflict resolution involves meditation and discussion. The ship's tactical analyst, Ben Carter, shook his head in amazement. Carter was a veteran of several human conflicts and understood military strategy better than most. How have they survived this long without any form of organized defense? Because apparently they've never needed one, Dr. Kim replied. According to their historical records, they've never encountered an aggressive species before. The hegemony represents the first hostile contact in their entire recorded history. Cultural anthropologist Dr. Amy Foster had been studying the environmental data with equal fascination. Foster was young but brilliant, with a talent for understanding how different conditions shape different societies. Their homeworld explains a lot, she said, bringing up atmospheric and geological data. Serenity has extremely stable weather patterns, low seismic activity, and gravity about 40% less than Earth normal. Even their predators appear to be relatively gentle creatures that hunt smaller prey. Sullivan tried to imagine growing up on such a world. No violent storms, no earthquakes, no dangerous predators. No wonder the Villani had developed into such a peaceful species. They had never needed to learn how to fight because their world had never taught them that violence was sometimes necessary for survival. 3 months of hyperspace travel gave the human team time to prepare thoroughly for first contact. They studied Villani culture, practiced their language, and developed protocols for interacting with a species that had never experienced warfare. None of them were quite prepared for what they found when they finally arrived at Serenity. The planet was beautiful beyond imagination. Floating cities connected by graceful bridges hung suspended in the atmosphere, their crystalline structures gleaming in the light of twin suns. Gardens cascaded down from elevated platforms, creating waterfalls of flowers that fell through the low gravity. Like slow-motion rain, Sullivan watched from the bridge as the Endeavour approached the largest floating city. It's like something from a dream, he said quietly. Dr. Foster was recording everything through the ship's sensors, documenting their first glimpse of alien civilization. The architecture appears to be grown rather than built, she observed. Those crystal formations follow organic patterns like they've been cultivated over centuries. A communication came through from the Villani, transmitted in their musical language but accompanied by mathematical translations that Dr. Kim's computers could interpret. The message was a welcome, expressing joy that someone had answered their call for help, but also confusion about how anyone could have traveled so far to reach them. The Endeavour was guided to a docking platform that had been hastily constructed to accommodate their ship. As Sullivan prepared to lead the first contact team, he couldn't help but notice how the Villani moved in the low gravity. They seemed to float rather than walk, their tall, slender forms perfectly adapted to their gentle world. The first meeting took place in what the Villani called a harmony chamber, a circular room with walls that seemed to pulse with soft, calming colors. The Villani leader, whose name translated roughly as Harmony Keeper, was 7 feet tall but moved with an ethereal grace that made him seem almost weightless. Through Dr. Kim's translation equipment, Harmony Keeper expressed gratitude for humanity's response to their distress call. But he also seemed puzzled by their offer of military assistance. "We thank you for coming so far to help us," Harmony Keeper said, his voice carrying musical tones that the translation system rendered as emotional undertones. "But we do not understand your offer to fight for us. We know nothing of fighting. We have no weapons beyond tools for gathering food from our gardens." Sullivan exchanged glances with his team. This was going to be more complicated than they had anticipated. "Can you tell us about the hegemony forces that threatened you?" he asked. Harmony Keeper's expression grew sad, his skin shifting to deeper blue tones that Dr. Foster's instruments interpreted as emotional distress. "They came in great ships that blotted out our suns. Their leader spoke to us through machines, demanding that we submit to their rule. When we offered to share our world and peace, they laughed. They said we had 30 days to surrender or they would destroy our cities with weapons of fire." Ben Carter leaned forward, his military mind already analyzing the threat. "What kind of weapons? How many ships?" "We do not know the names of their weapons," Harmony Keeper replied. "They showed us images of other worlds they had conquered. Cities turned to ash, populations enslaved. They said we were weak like all the others they had defeated." Dr. Kim was furiously taking notes, trying to understand the scope of the threat they were facing. "Have you had any contact with other species before the hegemony?" "Oh yes," Harmony Keeper said, his colors brightening slightly. "We know of 17 different peaceful peoples across this region of the galaxy. The hegemony has conquered 12 of them in recent cycles. The others hide in fear, hoping the invaders will not find them." Sullivan felt a chill as he realized the implications. The hegemony wasn't just threatening one peaceful world. They were systematically conquering an entire region of space, populated by species that had never learned to defend themselves. "Tell me about these other species," Sullivan said. "Are they all like your people?" "All evolved on gentle worlds like ours," Harmony Keeper confirmed. "Stable skies, predictable seasons, peaceful creatures. We sometimes wonder how life could exist any other way." Dr. Foster made a note in her files, realizing they had stumbled upon something significant. An entire section of the galaxy populated by species that had evolved on what humans would consider paradise worlds. No wonder they had all developed peaceful societies. Their environments had never forced them to become warriors. Sullivan made his decision. "Harmony Keeper, we need to tell you something about our world and our people. The place we come from is very different from Serenity." Over the next several hours, the human team explained Earth to their alien hosts. They described violent weather systems that could level cities, earthquakes that split continents, predators that hunted humans for food, and the constant struggle for survival that had shaped human evolution. The Villani listened in growing amazement and horror. To them, Earth sounded like a mythical hell world where no intelligent life could possibly survive, let alone thrive. "Your people must be incredibly strong to live in such conditions," Harmony Keeper finally said. His colors shifting to what Dr. Foster interpreted as all mixed with fear, Sullivan smiled grimly. "Strong enough to help you deal with the hegemony. But first we need to know more about these invaders. When will they return?" The hegemony fleet arrived exactly when their deadline expired, dropping out of hyperspace with the arrogance of conquerors who had never faced real resistance. 17 massive warships materialized at the edge of the Serenity system, their dark hulls bristling with weapons designed to intimidate defenseless populations into surrender. Admiral Krex stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, and gazed at the peaceful planet before him. The reptilian commander was 8 feet tall with scales that gleamed like polished metal under the bridge lights. His species had evolved on a harsh desert world where only the strongest survived, but even their concept of harshness was mild compared to the deathworld that had forged humanity. "Scan the system," Krex ordered his tactical officer. "I want to know if these weak creatures have tried to build any defenses since our last visit." The scan results appeared on the main display screen, showing the same floating cities and peaceful settlements that had been there before. But there was something new. A single alien vessel was docked at one of the orbital stations, its design unlike anything in the hegemony database. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, "we have detected one unknown vessel. Small, possibly a scout ship from another system." Krex studied the image with mild interest. In his 3 decades of conquest, he had encountered hundreds of species. Across this sector of the galaxy, all of them had followed the same pattern. Peaceful evolution on stable worlds had produced civilizations that knew nothing of warfare. They begged, they pleaded, they offered tributes, but they never fought. "Back! Open communication channels to both the planet and the unknown vessel," Krex commanded. "Let us see if these newcomers are any different from the other weak species we have conquered." On the surface of Serenity, Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan received the incoming transmission in the Harmony Chamber where he had been meeting with Villani leaders. The hegemony message was broadcast on all frequencies, designed to reach every listening device on the planet simultaneously. The image that appeared on their screens showed Admiral Krex in all his intimidating glory. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had never been challenged. "I am Admiral Krex of the Hegemony Empire," the message began. 30 days ago, we gave the inhabitants of this world a choice. Submit to our rule or face destruction. That deadline has now passed. Sullivan activated the translation system that Dr. Sarah Kim had prepared, allowing him to communicate directly with the hegemony commander. This would be humanity's first contact with an aggressive alien species. "Admiral Krex," Sullivan responded. "This is Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan of the Terran Exploration Force. We are here as allies of the Villani people." Krex's eyes narrowed as he studied the human face on his screen. The creature before him was smaller than most species he had encountered, but there was something in its expression that was unfamiliar. Where other species showed fear or desperation when facing hegemony forces, this being seemed calm and alert. "Terran," Krex said, testing the unfamiliar word. "We have no record of your species in our conquest files. What world do you come from?" "We call it Earth," Sullivan replied. "Perhaps you would like to know more about our homeworld before you make any threats against our allies." Krex laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through his command bridge. "Another peaceful species come to beg for the lives of these weaklings? Very well. Tell me about this Earth of yours. What makes you think you can stand against the might of the hegemony?" Sullivan looked at Dr. Kevin Thompson, who had joined the communication session from the Endeavor. The xenobiologist nodded and activated a data transfer that would send detailed information about Earth's environment to the hegemony flagship. "Admiral Krex," Thompson said, his voice carrying the calm tone of a scientist presenting facts. "Our homeworld has gravity nearly twice what you experience on your vessel. Our atmosphere contains violent storm systems with winds that can reach 300 kilometers per hour. The surface experiences regular seismic activity that can split continents." Krex studied the incoming data with growing confusion. The environmental readings made no sense. "No intelligent species could evolve under such conditions," Thompson continued his presentation. "Our oceans contain predators over 20 meters long with jaws powerful enough to crush metal. Our land masses are populated by creatures that actively hunt our species for food. We experience temperature variations that range from below -40 degrees to over 50 degrees Celsius." "Impossible," Krex interrupted. "No civilized species could develop under such conditions. Your data must be corrupted." "The data is accurate," Sullivan said. "Would you like to see documentation of human survival in these environments?" The next series of images that appeared on Krex's screen showed Humans doing things that seemed impossible to the hegemony commander. Footage of people walking through blizzards, surviving in deserts, climbing mountains that reached into the stratosphere, and swimming in oceans during storms that would terrify most spacefaring species. Krex's tactical officer leaned over to whisper urgent calculations in his commander's ear. The gravity readings from Earth were nearly double what hegemony forces could operate in effectively. The weather patterns showed instability that would ground their atmospheric craft. The geological activity would make surface operations extremely hazardous. This must be some kind of deception, Krex said, but there was uncertainty in his voice for the first time. No species evolves on a death world and achieves spaceflight. We did, Sullivan said simply. And now we're here to protect our friends. Ben Carter had been monitoring hegemony communications from the Endeavor's sensor array. The tactical analyst was fascinated by what he was seeing. The enemy fleet consisted of massive ships designed for overwhelming firepower against defenseless targets. Their weapons were powerful but unsophisticated, built for destroying cities rather than fighting mobile opponents. Commander, Carter reported through their secure channel, I'm analyzing their fleet composition. These ships are built for intimidation and bombardment, not ship-to-ship combat. Their crews are large but appear to have no experience with actual warfare. Dr. Amy Foster was documenting the cultural exchange taking place, realizing she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time, a hegemony commander was being confronted by a species that not only refused to submit, but seemed genuinely unimpressed by their threats. Krex tried to regain control of the situation. Even if your claims about this death world are true, you have only one small vessel. My fleet consists of 17 warships with enough firepower to reduce this planet to ash. Admiral, Sullivan said, before you commit to a course of action you might regret, there's something else you should know about humans. What? We've been fighting wars for our entire evolutionary history. Not just against other humans, but against our own planet. Every storm that tried to kill us made us stronger. Every predator that hunted us taught us to hunt better. Every disaster that struck our world forced us to become more adaptable. Sullivan paused, letting the implications sink in. You see? Admiral, you've spent your career conquering peaceful species that evolved on gentle worlds. But you've never faced a species that evolved specifically to survive violence. Krex stared at the human face on his screen, beginning to understand that something was very different about this encounter. In 30 years of conquest, no species had ever spoken to him with such confidence. They begged, they negotiated, they offered anything to avoid destruction. But this creature seemed almost eager for conflict. Are you threatening the hegemony empire? Krex asked. No, Sullivan replied. I'm explaining why your empire is about to learn what happens when you threaten a world under human protection. The communication ended abruptly as Sullivan closed the channel. On the hegemony flagship, Admiral Krex stood in stunned silence. For the first time in his career, he had encountered a species that seemed completely unafraid of his massive fleet. Worse, they had provided detailed documentation proving they came from a world so hostile that it had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. His tactical officer approached with sensor readings from the human vessel. Admiral, their ship is much smaller than ours, but the hull density readings are incredible. It's built to withstand stresses that would crush our vessels. Krex realized he was facing something unprecedented. A species that had not only survived on a death world, but had used that harsh environment to become something dangerous. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Admiral Krex felt a cold touch of fear. In the Harmony Chamber on Serenity, Harmony Keeper watched the human commanders with new understanding. These beings from the impossible world called Earth were not just offering to help. They were preparing for war with the casual confidence of predators, who had never encountered anything they couldn't handle. The Villani leader finally understood why the humans had seemed so strange. They were not peaceful because their world was gentle. They were peaceful by choice, despite coming from a place that had taught them to be the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Admiral Krex paced the command bridge of his flagship, trying to understand what he had just witnessed. In 3 decades of conquest, no species had ever spoken to him with such calm confidence. The humans had not begged for mercy or offered tribute. Instead, they had calmly explained why his empire should be afraid of them. "Deploy advanced landing forces to the planet's surface," Krex ordered his fleet commanders. "If these humans think their single ship can protect an entire world, they are about to learn the price of defying the hegemony." 3 hegemony troop transports launched from the main fleet, each carrying 500 soldiers equipped with standard conquest gear. These were not elite forces but regular troops trained for occupying defenseless worlds. They had never faced organized resistance because no peaceful species had ever been able to mount any on Serenity. "Lieutenant Commander Jake?" Sullivan watched the approaching transports through the Endeavor's sensors. He activated his communication system to contact the human task force that Admiral Wells had dispatched from Earth 3 weeks earlier. "Captain Rodriguez, are you in position?" Sullivan asked. The response came from Captain Alex Rodriguez now, commanding a small fleet of human warships that had arrived in the outer system just hours before the hegemony deadline expired. "We're ready, Commander. Marine units are prepared for immediate deployment." Sergeant Danny Murphy led the first wave of human Marines as they launched from their transport ships in small, fast assault craft. Murphy was 28 years old, a veteran of Earth's various conflicts who had trained his entire adult life for combat in hostile environments. He had fought in Arctic conditions, desert warfare, and urban battles. To him, the low gravity of Serenity just meant he could move faster and jump higher. The human assault craft were tiny compared to hegemony transports, but they moved with speed and precision that caught the alien forces completely off guard. While hegemony troops descended slowly in massive, heavily armored vehicles designed to intimidate rather than maneuver, the humans arrived like a swarm of angry insects. Murphy's team hit the first hegemony landing zone just as alien troops were beginning to disembark from their transport. The hegemony soldiers were tall, reptilian beings adapted for desert warfare on their homeworld. Their equipment was designed for overwhelming firepower against defenseless targets, not for fighting mobile opponents in varied terrain. "Contact," Murphy reported as his Marines engaged the first hegemony squad. "Enemy forces are slow to react and poorly positioned for actual combat." The battle that followed was unlike anything either side had expected. Hegemony forces found themselves facing humans who moved through Serenity's low gravity like they were flying. Human Marines leaped over obstacles that should have provided cover, changed direction in midair, and used the environment in ways that seemed impossible to opponents evolved on stable worlds. Major Lisa Campbell coordinated the defense from her command post in one of Serenity's floating cities. Campbell was a career military officer who had spent years developing tactics for fighting in varied environments. What she saw through her tactical displays amazed even her. "The enemy is completely unprepared for actual warfare," she reported. To Sullivan, "Their formations are designed for intimidation parades, not battlefield effectiveness. They're bunching up in the open and using suppressing fire patterns that waste ammunition." Dr. Sarah Kim served as liaison between human forces and Villani civilians who were watching the battle with a mixture of terror and fascination. The peaceful aliens had never seen organized violence before, and the sight of humans casually engaging in combat was both frightening and awe-inspiring. "The Villani leaders want to know if they should evacuate their cities," Dr. Kim reported to Campbell. "Tell them to stay in the upper levels of their floating cities," Campbell replied. "We're keeping the fighting on the ground-level platforms. The hegemony forces can't effectively reach the higher elevations in this gravity." On the ground, Sergeant Murphy was discovering just how unprepared the hegemony forces were for fighting humans. The alien soldiers were strong and well-armed, but they had never learned to adapt to changing battlefield conditions. When Murphy's team used the floating city's support structures to attack from unexpected angles, the hegemony troops seemed confused about how to respond. "These guys have never fought anyone who fights back," Murphy reported to his squad. They're expecting us to run away or surrender, not to actually shoot at them. The human Marines used tactics developed through centuries of warfare on Earth's varied terrain. They moved in small, flexible units that could adapt instantly to changing conditions. When hegemony forces tried to pin them down with heavy weapons, the humans simply moved to different positions and attacked from new angles. Dr. Kevin Thompson watched the battle from the Endeavour's observation deck, documenting everything for his research files. As a xenobiologist, he was fascinated by how different evolutionary pressures had shaped the two species' approaches to conflict. The hegemony soldiers are physically powerful, he noted, but they're adapted for straightforward confrontation. In predictable environments, humans evolved to handle constant environmental changes and unpredictable threats. In a fluid battle situation, there's no comparison. Admiral Krex watched the battle reports with growing alarm. His ground forces were not being defeated exactly, but they were being outmaneuvered and frustrated at every turn. The humans seemed to anticipate hegemony tactics before they were even implemented. How are they moving so fast in that gravity? Krex demanded of his tactical officers. The gravity on Serenity is only 40% of their homeworld normal, came the reply. For them, this is like fighting in reduced weight conditions. Krex realized he was seeing the practical application of everything the humans had told him about their death world. These creatures had not just survived on a hostile planet. They had been shaped by it into something the galaxy had never seen. Before, Ben Carter analyzed hegemony communications from his position aboard the Endeavour. The tactical analyst was learning valuable information about how the enemy forces operated. "Commander," Carter reported to Sullivan, the hegemony troops, "are requesting reinforcements and complaining about impossible battle conditions. They've never encountered opponents who use terrain advantages effectively." Dr. Amy Foster continued documenting the cultural implications of what they were witnessing. The Villani were seeing their first example of organized warfare, but more. Importantly, they were seeing humans in their natural element. The Villani are beginning to understand what human civilization really represents, Foster reported. They're realizing that our peaceful nature is a choice, not a necessity. On the battlefield, the difference between the two forces became increasingly clear. Hegemony soldiers fought like they were conducting a police operation against civilians. They expected opponents to flee or surrender when faced with superior firepower. Human Marines fought like they were engaging equal opponents in a contest. Where only the most adaptable would survive, Murphy's team had successfully disabled 2 hegemony landing sites and was moving toward the third when he received new orders from Major Campbell. "All units, the enemy is preparing to retreat to their transports," Campbell announced. "Do not pursue. Let them go back to their ships and report what they've seen." Sullivan understood Campbell's strategy. This first engagement was not meant to destroy the hegemony forces, but to demonstrate human capabilities. The real message was being sent to Admiral Krex and his fleet commanders. As hegemony troops retreated to their transports, leaving behind equipment and wounded soldiers, Admiral Krex stood on his bridge trying to process what had just happened. His forces had not been defeated in traditional terms, but they had been completely outclassed by a smaller force using tactics he did not understand. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "ground forces are requesting permission to withdraw to the fleet." Krex granted the request, but his mind was already working on the larger implications. These humans had just demonstrated that they could fight effectively against hegemony forces. More importantly, they had done it while protecting civilian populations and minimizing damage to the peaceful world below. For the first time in his career, Admiral Krex was facing an opponent that seemed to understand warfare better than he did. The humans had not just fought his troops. They had controlled the entire engagement, choosing when and where to fight while achieving their objectives with minimal effort. As the hegemony transports returned to the fleet, Krex realized that everything he thought he knew about conquest was about to change. These humans from their impossible death world had just introduced the concept of effective military resistance to a galaxy that had forgotten such things were possible. The galaxy was about to learn that when peaceful species called for help, the Hellworlders would answer, and they would bring with them lessons learned from the most dangerous classroom in the universe. Admiral Krex stared at the tactical display showing his retreating ground forces and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. No species had ever forced hegemony troops to withdraw before, and he could not allow word of this defeat to spread to other conquered worlds. "Prepare the fleet for full orbital bombardment," Krex ordered his weapons officers. "If these humans want to protect this world, they can watch it burn from space." The 17 hegemony warships moved into bombardment formation, their massive weapons arrays charging for an attack that would reduce Serenity's floating cities to scattered debris. This was the standard hegemony response to any form of resistance, overwhelming firepower designed to break the will of anyone who dared oppose them. Commander Jake Sullivan watched the enemy fleet movements from the bridge of the Endeavor and activated his emergency communication system. "Captain Rodriguez, the hegemony is preparing for orbital bombardment. We need the task force now." Rodriguez smiled grimly as he received the transmission. For the past 2 hours, the human fleet had been positioning itself using stealth, technology developed for operations in Earth's asteroid fields and radiation storms. Ships designed to survive solar flares and navigate through cosmic debris fields were nearly invisible to sensors built for detecting vessels in stable, predictable space. "All ships, drop stealth and engage," Rodriguez commanded, the human task. Force materialized around the hegemony fleet like ghosts becoming solid. 12 human warships appeared from seemingly empty space, their positions chosen to maximize tactical advantage. The ships were smaller than hegemony vessels but moved with the fluid precision of predators who had learned to hunt in three-dimensional space. Admiral Krex watched in shock as enemy vessels appeared on his sensors from impossible positions. How did they get so close without detection? His sensor officer checked his instruments frantically. "Admiral, their ships appear to be using some form of adaptive camouflage system. Our sensors registered them as background radiation or space debris." The first exchange of weapons fire revealed the fundamental difference between human and hegemony military philosophy. Hegemony weapons were designed for maximum intimidation, massive energy beams that could destroy entire city blocks but took time to charge and aim. Human weapons were built for precision and rapid targeting, smaller but far more accurate systems that could strike specific points on enemy vessels. Captain Rodriguez commanded the lead human vessel, a ship called the Defiant that had been specifically designed for combat operations. Unlike hegemony warships that relied on overwhelming size and firepower, human vessels were built for maneuverability and tactical flexibility. "Target their weapons arrays first," Rodriguez ordered his weapons officer, Lieutenant Lisa Martinez. "Disable their ability to bombard the planet." Martinez had trained for space combat in Earth's asteroid belt, where split-second timing and precise shooting were essential for survival. She targeted the charging systems of hegemony bombardment weapons with surgical precision, using multiple small strikes rather than attempting to destroy entire ships. The hegemony fleet found itself facing tactics they had never encountered before. Instead of engaging in massive ship-to-ship duels, the humans used small fighter craft that moved through space like they were flying through Earth's turbulent atmosphere. Human pilots who had learned to navigate thunderstorms and wind shears moved through the vacuum of space with impossible grace. Commander Jake Sullivan launched from the Endeavor in a human fighter craft, leading a squadron of pilots against hegemony defensive systems. Sullivan had trained for atmospheric combat in conditions that would ground most aircraft, and space flight in Serenity's stable system felt almost relaxing by comparison. "All fighters use the enemy's size against them," Sullivan instructed. His pilots? "Those big ships can't track fast-moving targets effectively?" The human fighters attacked like a swarm of insects against giant predators, too small and fast to target effectively but capable of striking vital systems with pinpoint accuracy. Hegemony gunners found themselves trying to swat flies with hammers. While the flies systematically disabled their weapons. Dr. Kevin Thompson monitored the battle from his position aboard the Endeavor. analyzing how different evolutionary pressures had shaped each species' approach to space combat. The hegemony builds for intimidation and overwhelming force, he noted. Humans build for survival and adaptability. On the surface of Serenity, Dr. Amy Foster was documenting the Villani reaction to their first space battle. The peaceful aliens watched through their observation systems as human and hegemony forces engaged in three-dimensional combat above their world. The Villani are amazed by human tactical coordination, Foster reported. They're saying our pilots move like they're performing a dance, but a deadly one. Harmony Keeper stood beside Foster in the observation chamber, his colors shifting between awe and fear as he watched the battle unfold. Your people fight like the storms move on your homeworld, he said through the translation system. Unpredictable but purposeful. The space battle revealed something that Admiral Krex had never considered possible. Human engineering designed to survive Earth's hostile environment, produce ships that were incredibly resilient. When hegemony weapons did manage to strike human vessels, the damage was far less than expected. Admiral, his tactical officer reported with growing alarm, their ships are absorbing our weapons fire better than expected. Hull composition appears to be designed for extreme stress resistance. Krex realized that everything about human technology reflected their deathworld origins. Ships built to survive solar radiation, asteroid impacts, and gravitational anomalies were naturally resistant to weapons designed for use against vessels from peaceful worlds. Then Carter coordinated human fleet movements from his position aboard. The Defiant, using tactical principles developed through centuries of Earth-based warfare. Enemy formation is breaking apart, he reported to Rodriguez. They're not trained for multi-vector combat. The hegemony fleet was discovering that their standard battle tactics were useless against opponents, who treated three-dimensional space combat as a natural extension of atmospheric flight. Human ships moved in coordinated patterns that seemed chaotic but were actually carefully planned maneuvers designed to confuse and overwhelm larger opponents. As the battle continued, it became clear that the hegemony was not just losing. They were being systematically outclassed by a smaller force using superior tactics and technology. Human weapons disabled hegemony systems without destroying entire ships, demonstrating a level of precision that spoke of advanced military doctrine. Admiral, his communications officer reported, 3 of our ships are requesting permission to withdraw. Their weapon systems are disabled and they're taking heavy damage. Krex watched his fleet being picked apart by opponents who seemed to anticipate his every move. For the first time in his career, he was facing an enemy that understood warfare better than he did. Dr. Sarah Kim maintained communication between human forces and Villani leaders throughout the battle, explaining human tactics and reassuring the peaceful aliens that their world was being protected. The humans are not destroying the hegemony ships, she explained to Harmony Keeper. They're disabling them to minimize loss of life. This concept amazed the Villani even more than human. Combat effectiveness? The idea that warriors could show mercy while winning battles was completely foreign to their understanding of violence. As more hegemony ships found their weapons disabled and their engines damaged, Admiral Krex faced a decision no hegemony commander had ever confronted. His fleet was being defeated by a smaller force, and continuing the battle would only result in more losses. Signal the human fleet, Krex ordered reluctantly. Request communication with their commander. Captain Rodriguez appeared on Krex's screen, his expression calm despite commanding a battle that was reshaping galactic history. Admiral Krex, are you ready to discuss terms? What terms? Krex asked, still trying to understand how his overwhelming advantage had disappeared so quickly. Withdraw your fleet from Villani space and never return, Rodriguez said simply. In exchange, we'll allow your damaged ships to retreat and repair themselves. Krex realized he was not just facing military defeat but a complete reversal of everything. He understood about galactic power structures. These humans were offering him mercy while demonstrating they could destroy his entire fleet if they chose to. If I agree to your terms, Krex asked, what guarantee do I have that you won't pursue my forces? Rodriguez smiled with the confidence of someone who held all the advantages. Admiral, we didn't come here to conquer territory or destroy your empire. We came here to protect our friends. As long as you leave peaceful species alone, you'll never see us again. The implication was clear. Humanity was not interested in galactic conquest, but they would respond to any aggression against species under their protection. The galaxy was about to learn that the Hellworlders had appointed themselves as guardians of the innocent.